And right along. So I saw some of the papers. I was excited to get started reading them. They look good. They look really good. How many of you are having trouble still uploading to Moodle? Because I'm going to I'm going to ask Pam Bailey. Tash, you're still having trouble?
I contacted Pam and she tried to tell me to delete some files.
Yeah.
And it didn't work because the files are not deleted.
Okay.
So I don't know. I emailed her back again and see what she says now, but none of the advice she gave me is working.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And Jimmy, you're having trouble as well.
Yes, ma'am.
With the drag and drop.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Anyone else having trouble? Tanisha, was that you who said yes? Raise your hand if you're having trouble. Okay. Okay, good. I just want to get that sorted out and get you guys some help getting that sorted out. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully we'll get that resolved soon so you won't have the frustration. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about organization methods of developing an idea. We're going to start with illustration, which is on 345. They call these rhetorical modes, and they're just kind of patterns of organizing your thoughts. Traditionally, or the original ones, they just saw 4, and they were narration, description, exposition, which means explaining, and argument, which means persuasion. Then they decided, well, maybe there are different patterns that are a little more specific to a purpose, and they included process analysis, classification or division, definition, comparison contrast, chronological, spatial, problem solution, cause and effect. And they're just kind of patterns of organizing your thoughts. Sometimes they naturally kind of help you, they naturally occur to you because they help you organize and present your material. For example, today for this paper on bullying, the question, the prompt was kind of set up, define the problem of cyberbullying and talk about what schools and families can do to prevent it. So that's kind of a problem section and a solution section inherently in that question. So it's possible that you just decided to organize your things that way on your own. And today we're going to be doing a paper on kind of the definition of family. So you'll be doing a definition paper using that method of organization. And we're going to talk about today in detail some of the useful methods that you might use at work or you might use in your academic work. And we've been doing that. Illustration, where you're explaining things with examples. Narration, which is where you're telling a story. Description, which is where you're describing the details. And process analysis, which is where you're explaining either how to do something or giving an overview of how they're done. So process analysis is often used in technical writing and in academic writing. You have to explain things. Illustration is often used in academic writing and in scientific writing. Narration is used in police reporting, incident reports, how the patient presents. Sometimes when you're telling how a patient presents. It also, I think I told you, is used to dress up reports. It can make a dry set of statistics really come to life if you have a little story and narration at the beginning, at the outset, or at the end, where you feature a person who the statistics relate to. That can really be a helpful thing. And problem solution is often written in academic reports and that in academic writing. And that's kind of what you did yesterday, talking about cyberbullying. So we're going to talk about illustration today, page 345. I think we did a little bit of this yesterday. So I think we're going to dive in a little bit further and look a little bit more at a model paragraph. Page 358 has a model paragraph of advice to parents. If you're a parent, you might laugh at this, or you might think this is useful. Does someone want to read page 358, model advice to parents? Topic sentence. Kaylee, are you volunteering? You are not volunteering. Tasha, are you volunteering? All right, I will do it. Children should have to help out with the daily chores. All children of school age should understand that it is only fair that everyone should take part. Even the youngest can put away their toys at the end of the day and help set the table. Older children should help with the cooking, make their own beds, put away their clothes, and take out the garbage. Teenagers should be expected to help with the shopping and house cleaning. They should help with the childcare when necessary. By the way, teenagers who do such tasks for a family should not feel entitled to be paid for their efforts. There are very few families in our society that can afford hired help. Moreover, if you think all of the above applies only to girls, think again. Boys, now more than ever, must learn to be responsible for any and all of the family household tasks. Children who grow up sharing in the household work will be more self-sufficient than the princess or prince, who will certainly grow up to be a very disappointing partner or spouse. So that was advice from a newspaper columnist. And each bit of that illustrates the topic sentence that children should have to help out with the daily chores. I just wanted to do that as a little reminder. The basic theory, though, of any paragraph is that I think it should have a topic sentence. If that's at the beginning, it should also kind of, if you can, think about adding a closing sentence that repeats the question you outlined, or the topic sentence verbatim, or paraphrases it, so they know they're done. So in a process analysis of steps, you could say at the beginning, setting up your Zoom account is relatively easy if you follow these steps. And then you list the steps, and then at the bottom you say, by following these steps, your Zoom account should be ready to go. You kind of give them an idea that they're finished, and tell them, again, it's like a paragraph is a miniature essay. The topic sentence tells them where they're going to go. The middle is the heart of it all. And then at the end, give them a little sense that they've come through all the ideas that you wanted to offer, and they got it. It's a little sense of closure by framing it. You don't have to. I just think stylistically, it's nice. It's a help to your reader, regardless of the rhetorical mode, whether it's an illustration paragraph, whether it's a persuasion paragraph, whether it's a descriptive paragraph. I think those are good strategies. I don't think that a paragraph needs to have 5 sentences or 8 sentences per se. I think it could be whatever it takes. I know James Joyce could write a paragraph that took up 2 pages. I don't recommend that. People don't often like to wade through. And the little indentation, the little white space gives you a place to breathe, a little place to put the information into a chunk and put it somewhere in your organizing system in your brain. So it's nice if you have that much information in a paragraph, maybe make it 2. You can have 2 paragraphs about the same topic, right? Or 3 or 4. So illustration, we finished a little bit. You make a point, and then you find ways to prove that point with discrete pieces of evidence or with one long example. That's illustration. We're going to move on to narration, which is on 363. Narration tells a story. Narration is the oldest, did we talk about this before? Narration is the oldest and best known form of verbal communication. It is quite simply the telling of a story. Page 363 talks about this. It is, you make a point with your story. It's not just a story for self-expression. It has a point. Usually you order your details according to chronological order, time sequence. You use transitions, first, second, third, next, later, later that day, to show a shift in time. And you take a step-by-step approach. They have offered a number of model paragraphs, and I think some of them are really fun to read and really nice examples of narration. But we've all told stories our whole lives. We've all listened to stories our whole lives. And so it's a model that we're quite familiar with, I think. This one is about Helen Keller and her teacher, Annie Sullivan. Does everybody know who Helen Keller is, by the way? Nicole, tell us who Helen Keller is. Can you do it? What's going on?
All I remember is she was blind, I think, and she used Braille to read. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And
That's true.
I mean, those are kind of the only couple details I remember, that she was blind and she used the Braille system to read.
That is true.
I
That
know
is
it's
true.
more, but I just can't think right now. My brain isn't.
That's a great start.
Sorry.
She was blind and she was also deaf.
Okay.
And
I know that.
so at the time, her parents thought that the best thing to do was to just let her have a happy life, which they considered letting her eat off their plate and not trying to teach her anything, because they sort of assumed that she couldn't learn. And they didn't want to upset her by trying to make her learn. And they didn't know how to teach her things. And they got a few teachers coming to teach her little things. And then they got Annie Sullivan, who ended up teaching her how to sign into her hand. And then she actually learned that items have names and words have meaning. And she became a writer. She became a public speaker. She became a political activist. She's on a coin in Alabama, I think. She's from Alabama. She's a really interesting person. And Annie Sullivan, her teacher, is too. There's a play about her that they did at Tri-C several years ago, but it's based on a movie called The Miracle Worker, and that is Annie Sullivan, the teacher, was considered a miracle worker by some. So this is the famous kind of account of how she was learning to associate words with items. Does someone want to read it?
Sure, I'll read.
It's on page, oh, thank you.
The morning after my teacher came, she led me into her room and gave me a doll. The little blind children at the Perkins Institution had sent it, and Laura Bridgman had dressed it. But I did not know this until afterward. When I had played with it a little while, Miss Sullivan slowly spelled it into my hand, the word D-O-L-L. I was at once interested in this finger play and tried to imitate it. When I finally succeeded in making the letters correctly, I was flushed with childish pleasure and pride. Running downstairs to my mother, I held up my hand and made the letters for the doll. I did not know that I was spelling a word or even the word existed. I was simply making my fingers go in monkey-like imitations. In the days that followed, I learned how to spell in this uncomprehending way a great many words, among them pen, hat, cup, and a few verbs like sit, stand, and walk. But my teacher had been with me several weeks before I understood that everything has a name.
Thank you. It's amazing. So at first she learned to make the shapes of the letters and she thought that was fun and she was showing off. And this is where she at least learned to follow her teacher. Annie Sullivan was, she grew up in an orphanage with her brother. He was blind. And so she was interested in that's, I think, how she learned Braille. And he died at a young age. And she was only about 19 years old when she came to teach. And she was pretty harsh on Helen Keller at first. The parents thought, for example, they had allowed her to walk around the table and eat off their plates, and not because they thought they shouldn't correct her. It upset her. And so Annie Sullivan made her sit at her own place and eat off her own plate. And there was a big tantrum and the parents were so upset. They thought she was, upsetting their child. So she said she wanted to go into their back little garden house and live there for a week with the little girl. And so she did that, trying to teach her things. And there's a very famous scene where when the little girl says she didn't know that words meant anything, she learned that at the pump with the water. She had her hands under the water. And her teacher would put her hands under the water outside, and then she'd spell in the water, W-A-T-E-R. It's a really famous scene. It's a really interesting story. Anyway, I was glad. Thank you, Nicole, for telling us a little bit about Helen Keller. That's a nice one.
You're welcome.
And the Perkins Institute is a really famous school for the blind. There is another story. So they say using narration to make a point. You can just tell stories and they're fun to listen to, but sometimes you're telling them in your writing to make a point. And so here in exercise 2, we're going to read a couple of summaries of 2 famous stories. For each one, we're going to try to decide what was the point of this story. Why did they include this story, okay? So, paragraph 365, page 365, paragraph 1, exercise 2. A young boy becomes infatuated by a girl in his neighborhood, a girl he has never spoken to, but admires from a distance. One day, the girl does speak to the boy, asking him if he plans to go to a special fair, Araby, being held in the city. The boy says he will go and bring back a present for her. From then on, all he can think about is getting to Araby. When he finally catches a train to the bazaar, he finds that it is nearly over. His growing sense of frustration is only made worse when the lights are turned off. At the end, gazing into darkness, he feels nothing but anguish and anger. What do you think? Why do you think that story would have been included? What is the point of that story?
His feelings.
And being infatuated with the girl.
Yeah, but he probably didn't get to bring her back a gift. He was too late.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she ever, if that interfered then, because he didn't have the gift to bring her and he didn't have a way to talk to her again. I don't know, but he feels like he came too late, missed opportunity. Yeah. Well, this is a terrible one. I don't want to do number 2. I don't want to do it at all. Yesterday, we talked about coherence. The story has to be coherent. It has to make sense. It has to be easy for the reader to follow along with. So, we did a little bit of this with the very first example where you put the sentences in order so it made sense. This one is an example of putting a story to make sense. There are 6 events that make this little day a disaster, and they're given in the order that they occur. And even though they do some flashback or forward, they use mostly a chronological order of events. Does someone want to read this?
Where are we?
366, achieving coherence. Placing details in the order of time sequence.
I'll read it, but I don't understand what you want me to read.
My day was a disaster. The little.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay.
My day was a disaster. First, it had snowed during the night, which meant I had to shovel before I could leave for work. I was mad that I hadn't gotten up earlier. Then I had trouble starting my car. And to make matters worse, my daughter wasn't feeling well and she didn't think she should go to school. When I eventually did arrive at work, I was 20 minutes late. Soon I found out my assistant had forgotten to make copies of a report I needed at 9 o'clock. I quickly had to make another plan. By 5 o'clock, I was looking forward to getting my paycheck. Foolish woman. When I went to pick it up, The office assistant told me that something had gone wrong with the computers. I would not be able to get my check until Tuesday. Disappointed, I walked down the hill to the parking lot. There I met my final defeat. In my hurry to park the car in the morning, I had left my parking lights on. Now my battery was dead. Even the optimist like me had the right to be discouraged.
Thank you. You read that very nicely, but I could hear a smile in your voice. So, so
I've had those days.
yeah, I know. This reminded me of that book, Alexander and his terrible, very bad, no good day. There was a book in the 70s written about a little fourth grader, and he had a terrible day. And a lot of it was his own fault, but it still was bad. This, at the end, even an optimist like me had the right to be discouraged, kind of frames my day was a disaster and tells you a little bit more about why. Thank you for reading that. Do you see some of the chronological order cues? First, it snowed. Then I had trouble. When I eventually did arrive, I was 20 minutes late. Soon, you can see those kind of transitional phrases.
Mhm.
In the back of the book, in the appendix, A33 has a list of transitions that they have compiled that might work for different modes of writing. So if you are having trouble thinking of anything more than first, second, and third, which certainly do the trick, then, and you want to add a little different flavor to your writing, you can look there for more ideas. You want to do a little challenge? On 367, exercise 5, we get to place the details in the order of time sequence. I don't know if you remember this story, the story of Flight 1549. I wouldn't have remembered the flight number, but it's when the plane in New York took off, and before it could get too high, it had to come down, and the guy crash landed it in the water. Do you remember that? Sullenberger, and they call him Sully, and he wrote a book about it, and they made a movie about it because everyone was saved.
Is that the movie with
Saint, I
Denzel
remember that.
Washington?
No, that's a
No.
different one. This was with
No.
Tom Hanks. I actually just got
Oh.
that movie.
Okay.
It's the one, if you've ever seen the news pictures, everybody's standing on this floating plane. They're standing on the wings, waiting for the boat or the helicopter to come and get them. Because he landed in the water, and water's not really a soft landing, apparently. But he did it. And he did it, and no one was killed. And so he's kind of a heroic guy. I guess they all train for it, but when you have to do it, it's another matter. So what I thought we could do was you could spend a few, we could read these out loud, and then we could put them in order. That's the goal. So another possibility was to try to get to an airport in New Jersey, but again, there was not enough power. Second sentence, a flock of birds had hit the engine without warning. Number 3, amazingly, everybody survived this crash, which has become known as the miracle on the Hudson. The flight began at LaGuardia Airport without incident. The pilot, Captain Chesley B. Sullenberger, spoke to the air traffic controllers and discussed the options. One possibility was to return to the original airport, but the airplane did not have enough power. Everyone was shocked when the pilot announced he would have to ditch the plane into the frigid Hudson River. Suddenly, the pilot and co-pilot experienced a loss of power in both engines. So, what do you think should be first?
The flight began.
Yeah, I think so too. Good. And what should be next?
A flock of
It's like
birds
a birds.
without warning.
Yeah. That was what was amazing to me, that this was, birds got sucked into the engine, I think, some geese. And yeah, both engines, my husband is pointing out. My husband loves flying, kind of, he knows all about flying. So they got into both of the engines. What's next?
Loss of power of both engines.
I think so. Yes, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. What's next?
Then suddenly the pilot.
One possibility.
The pilot air traffic.
Pilot spoke to the air traffic controllers.
Yeah, I think That is the next one because he discussed the options and then we hear the options, which is,
One possibility.
yes, was to return to the original airport, but they didn't have enough power. This must be happening so fast. Another possibility. Oh, this is why I can't play. I read the answers. I read the answers. I'm sorry. So what comes after another possibility?
Everyone was shocked.
Everyone was shocked. Yeah, exactly. And that leaves us with one answer next, which would be amazing. Everybody survived. You know, it seems like to me that that was just yesterday, but I realized that was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It was a long time ago. Time goes so fast. Very nice. Oh, can we do the next one? It's about one of my favorite human beings in the history. I never knew her. This is a story about, exercise 6 is about Sojourner Truth. Does anyone know anything about Sojourner Truth? Anyone? All right, then I will tell you. She was born an enslaved person. We think in 17 something in New York, back when New York had slavery as legal. And it was a terrible life for her. She was sold when she was about 10. And then she was married to a person named Thomas, and they had several children. Some of the children were also sold. And so slavery was terrible and horrible and extremely harsh, and she ran away. And I don't like to use the word ran away. I think she escaped. She escaped and she went to New York City, where she established a school for other people who had escaped from slavery so they could learn skills to work in the city. Because many of the people who escaped slavery had worked on agricultural, farms, and there wasn't a lot of farming in New York City. So she was holding a school where she taught cooking and domestic skills so that people could get work. Then they made slavery illegal in New York, and she began traveling and working for the abolition, she wanted for African Americans to have the right to vote, and she wanted women to have the right to vote. And she went all over the country speaking. She wrote her autobiography, although she actually couldn't write. Her friend wrote it for her. She dictated it because it was illegal to teach enslaved people to write. She advocated for women to get the right to vote and for African Americans to get the right to vote, neither of which happened in her lifetime, but she still worked really hard doing it. She was the first African American to use the legal system and win. She did that 3 times, I think. And after the Civil War, she was collecting money and household goods for African Americans who served in the war, who no longer had a place to go. And Abraham Lincoln invited her to the White House. He called her Auntie. She's buried in Michigan, in Battle Creek. And when she died, 3,000 people came to her funeral. I don't even know 3,000 people.
I can't believe I never heard this story.
Oh my gosh,
I'm
there's
like,
a statue.
really?
There's a statue of her in the Capitol. There is a statue of her in the Capitol. She gave one of the best speeches in American history in Akron, right down the road in a building that no longer exists. And it's a famous speech called Ain't I a Woman? You should look it up. And if you can, and you want to look it on the TED Talks, Alfred Woodard does an acting impersonation of it. I have to tell you 3 or 4 other things about her. I have to tell you 3 or 4 things about her. Hi. She was over 6 feet tall. And and she was fearless. And she did public speaking at a time when. Hi.
Hey, baby.
You say, hey, Diamond?
Yes.
Hey.
Hey.
How are you?
Hey, boo.
Hey. Oh, hey, ladies. Oh.
Okay.
Okay. Had to take her mask down.
So we'll get back to this. It's nice to see you. Who wants to read these sentences out of order? Who wants to read? Sentence number 1. She was received by Abraham Lincoln. Okay, I'll do it.
Was received by Abraham Lincoln in the White House the year before his assassination in 1865.
Yes.
She was 46 when she took the name Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth began life as a slave when she was born in 1797, but she was set free in 1827. She spent her final years giving lectures throughout the North. At the age of 52, she traveled to the West, where her speeches against slavery and for women's rights drew large crowds. In 1860, at the beginning of the Civil War, she was active in gathering supplies for the Black regiments that were fighting in the war. Not long after her first trip west, she settled in Battle Creek, Michigan.
Yes. And many of my Michigan students go there as a field trip to see her grave in Battle. My husband has done that in Battle Creek, Michigan. That's where the Kellogg's factory was. But that's because Mr. Kellogg was a friend of hers, and he had established a kind of a TB sanatorium there. He thought through eating good food you could cure TB. You can't, but he ended up inventing cereal. And so anyway, that's why she was in Battle Creek. Who wants to put these in order? What happens first?
Sojourner Truth began life as a slave.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
What's next?
She was 46.
All right. What do you think is next?
At the age of 52?
Yeah, I think so.
I feel like this one is making us do math.
I was thinking that you could actually, I was just thinking, if you could add up when she was born, you could figure out what her age was. Don't make your readers do math. Put your things in order for them. They could do it for fun, but Diane's right. We should put it in order for them. So in the age of 52, she traveled to the West. What's next?
Not long after?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. What about?
I feel like in 1860 maybe should have come first.
Yeah, maybe. Because not long after her first trip west, in 1860 is the beginning of the Civil War. 1865 was after the Civil War. All right.
So 1860 will be number 3.
Is that what we're saying?
I
Yeah.
think.
Okay. No.
Oh.
No. So Sojourner Truth began life as a slave in 1797 is number 1. She was 46 when she took the name Sojourner is number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 is number 3 is probably at the age of 52.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she traveled west. Not long after her first trip west would be 4.
Mm-hmm.
Number 5 would be at the beginning of the Civil War in 1860. I think number 6 would be she was received by Abraham Lincoln in 1865.
See, I was going by the dates. So I had her Sojourner Truth as number 1. Then she was 46, number 2. Then I don't know why, maybe because of the date. It said in 1860, she at the beginning of the Civil War, she was active. Then I went back to 4, where it say she received by Abraham Lincoln, probably because it said 1865.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in 1860 she would have been 45 years old.
Look
think
at the
you're
math is saving us. Math and years and dates is saving us. Okay, good. Good.
And then 5 is at the age of 52, I think. I'm not sure.
I think you could negotiate some of these if they don't have dates, but I think you make a perfect sense the way you've come. How many people agree? You're going with that?
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay. But by the way, her name when she was born was Isabella Baumfree, and she changed it to Sojourner Truth. Does anybody know what Sojourner Truth means?
No.
Sojourner is a person who travels around looking for or seeking. So
Oh,
she's a searcher of truth. She said it came to her in a vision. Her name was Isabella Baumfree when she was born. She grew up on a plantation in New York, back when New York was New Amsterdam, kind of, and settled by Dutch people. And she grew up speaking Dutch. English wasn't her first language. So she was amazing. I thank you for that. That was good. That was really good.
I'm gonna have to see if I could find a movie on her. Cause that's interesting.
Yeah, I think so. She was fearless. I could tell you lots more about her, but we need to move on and learn more about.
English.
Yeah. How about, thank you for that. How about description, page 381? Oh, we've looked at description a little bit already. Description is using sensory images to create a picture. There's not necessarily any story there. And we did this one where we looked at the introduction, that sample paragraph. There's another sample paragraph. The very end in 399. And this is a little story about a famous multimillionaire cowboy. Somebody feel like reading in a dramatic voice?
What page is that?
399. We're just looking for dominant impressions and that every sensory image will support that impression. So in descriptive writing, you kind of make a theme. Well, that's a picture I saw. It's kind of dark. It's kind of scary. It's kind of comforting and old. It's kind of new and shiny and sharp. It's kind of trendy. Whatever your image that you want to convey, your dominant impression, then you choose your details, your sensory images to kind of reinforce that impression. This is from Charlie Chaplin's book, My Autobiography.
Oh, okay.
It was dark.
It was dark when we entered his bungalow, and when we switched on the light, I was shocked. The place was empty and drab. In his room was an iron bed with a light bulb hanging over the head of it, a rickety old table, and one chair were the other furnishings. Near the end of the bed was a wooden box upon which was a brass ashtray filled with cigarette butts. The room allotted to me was almost the same, only it was minus a grocery box. Nothing worked. The bathroom was unspeakable. One had to take a jug to fill it from the bath tap and empty it down to flush to make the toilet work. This was the home of G.M. Anderson, the multimillionaire cowboy.
Well, that was surprising. Took a little turn at the end, right? One little light bulb hanging over the head, a rickety old table, no running water, nothing working, and yet it was the home of a multimillionaire. So I like putting that topic sentence at the end there because it was kind of shocking. How many people think it works at the end? You probably think it works at the end. You did a nice job reading that. Thank you. I want to move on to the last thing, which is process analysis. Developing paragraphs in process analysis, 405. Did we get to read the process of how to take a tick bite, take a tick off? Today's the day. Process analysis is a method of developing that provides a step-by-step explanation of how something is done or how something works. And if it is important what order this steps are carried out in, then you need to make that clear in the writing. I don't know, sometimes I think about those old cartoons where they're disabling a bomb and they're reading the instructions and it says pull the blue wire out, but first make sure, and they've already pulled the blue wire out. So if it's that critical, make it go in order. Tick bites, who wants to read about tick bites? Probably nobody, but who will acquiesce to read about tick bites?
I'll do it.
Oh, thank you.
Tick bites. Remove the tick with a pair of tweezers. Never try to remove a tick by burning it or applying kerosene or other substances. Gently grasp the tick with the tweezers as close to the skin as possible. Slowly pull the insect straight out. Do not twist as you pull, or the tick's body will separate from its head, leaving the head buried under your skin. As you pull, do not squeeze the body of the tick. Squeezing can inject infectious fluids from the tick into you. After removing the tick, thoroughly clean the bite area around your hands. Oh, what am I saying? Thoroughly clean the bite area and your hand, preferably with an antiseptic such as rubbing alcohol. If the tick came from an area with high incidence of Lyme disease, save the tick and consult a doctor. Otherwise, monitor the bite area. If small raised bumps appear at the bite site, or if you develop a rash around the bite or flu-like symptoms, see your doctor. In the case of a tick bite, time is critical because the longer the tick is attached to the person's body, the greater the risk of contracting Lyme disease.
I did not know that until I read this paragraph. It makes sense, though. And aren't there other illnesses that ticks could bring? You're all the nursing students. Perhaps you know more about tick-borne illnesses than I do, but I think a lot of times it's just a bite, but sometimes it brings illness, right? My favorite part about this is don't burn it. If it's stuck to your arm, I don't know, was that ever really what people were doing? Burning a tick off? If they were, it says don't burn it, even if they weren't. Thank you. So you can see step by step. Slowly do this after removing. Very nice. Nicely done. Who would like to read the next paragraph, the topic sentence, the education of Malcolm X?
Come on,
Okay.
son.
When Malcolm X was in prison, he became very frustrated because he could not express his thoughts.
Hold on, my light sucks.
Wait, you were doing a good job.
Okay, my light went kind of.
Oh,
He could not
okay.
express his thoughts in letters. Give me your glasses. I need glasses. Hold on, y'all. That's what happens when you get old. You need your glasses.
Tell me about it.
Okay. When Malcolm X was in prison, he became very frustrated because he could not express his thoughts in letters written to his family and friends, nor could he read well enough to get the meaning from a book. He decided to change this situation. First, he got hold of a dictionary along with some paper and pencils. He was astounded at how many words there were. Not knowing what else to do, he turned to the first page and began by copying words from the page. It took him the entire day. Next, he read what he had written aloud over and over again. He was excited to be learning words he never knew existed. The next morning, he reviewed what he had forgotten and then copied the next page. He found he was learning about people, places, and events from history. This process continued until he had filled a tablet with all the A's and then all the B's. Eventually, Malcolm X copied the entire dictionary.
That story makes me happy and sad at the same time. That's a lot of dedication and a lot of motivation.
Yes.
I think a kind of a painful way to learn new words. But he did. He ended up being a great speaker and writer. Very nice. Thank you. They had highlighted the transition words by italicizing them, and you were reading them with such emphasis. It was so lovely. Next, it was a great teaching tool. Thank you for that. You knew how to read with meaning. I'm not going to ask us to read how to make a Swedish spice cake. You can, but I'm not going to. Those are the topics right now. I did want to show you a little bit more about the APA reference citations. If you turn to page 599 in your book, 599, your book has a little bit of help about APA. $5.99. Okay. No, I overshot it. They have MLA style in this book, and they also have APA. How many of you had learned MLA in high school or in another school? Yeah. So this is a little bit of a change for us. That's what English classes usually use. But because the school is using APA for all of your other work, it makes sense to practice and learn APA. 599 has a little section on APA. I don't know why I put 599. Well, that's just the MLA section, really. That's not as useful as I had thought it would be. I'm sorry. All right. I refer you to the APA website. I will tell you that APA, I think I mentioned this yesterday, APA has now made a 7th edition. Did I tell you that? Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you have learned APA or looked up, a lot of the templates are still 6th edition. I think that's fine right now. The changes I don't think are that big. And I'm going to go with them. If you learned how to do your cover sheet in the 6th edition form, stay with it. For example, the OWL has the 6th edition still up, but they're not commenting on it anymore. And they're going to take it, they're going to leave it up without changing it so that you can compare. What will usually happen is that there will be a lot of people who are teachers who will post little videos about the differences between 6 and 7 to help other teachers learn how, or to help other writers. Sort of a cottage industry, because the actual APA books are kind of pricey, and not everybody wants to buy a new one each time. And I don't make my students buy an APA book at all, and they're not free. So often the websites are very, very helpful. I just wanted to tell you. There is one more thing I wanted to tell you about. I wanted to talk briefly about proofreading. There's a section in the back of your book that's on the very back page that has some editing symbols. Are you familiar with these? Are you familiar with them?
Yes.
Can't really see them, but.
Do you have your book? You can look on the back cover inside. It's on this little back cover. Yeah.
Right.
And these are editing symbols. So sometimes instead of writing spell out, your instructor would just write that. Do you see it? Instead of writing run on, they might just write that. It's a lot easier. But if you don't know what that means, you're likely to ignore it. If they draw, often this is the sign for insert. Do you see it? This little caret arrow, and it says insert something here. And they'll put at the top, insert an apostrophe, insert and a comma. And if they insert it from the top, it's an apostrophe. Can you see that? So, I was going to put you into teams, and I would have you draw these on the board. And I would say, what's the symbol for insert space? And you would add it. I would ask, what's the symbol for transpose? But I think that's too hard to do. I just wanted you to see that these are here. Sometimes a teacher or an editor will write these on your paper. And if you don't know what they mean, you'll think, what is that? And you might be likely to ignore it. For example, if you see transposed letters, it looks like this. Do you know what that means? That means if you had written TEH instead of TE, it means switch these two letters. Oh. You make that little symbol. It also goes for words. It means switch them, transpose them. And my favorite is the one that is the symbol for add space. Do you see it at the bottom on the right-hand side?
Yes.
It also has other meanings in our world right now. It means pound. What else does it mean? Hashtag?
Number.
So, number. So, if you see that, it means add space. I just wanted you to see what that meant. Did we talk about strategies for proofreading? Have we done that?
No.
Oh,
Oh, good. Well, then we are going to do that. Proofreading is hard to do on your own because often, and I think we've talked about this, you read what you thought you wrote. You read what you expect to read. Your brain thinks that you're helping. And so it's really hard to catch an error because your brain fills it in. It just fixes it. So one of the things you can do is set your work aside for a couple of days if you have that luxury, and then it's not as likely that you'll remember exactly the way you worded it and expect to read it. You can always have someone else read it. You can read it backwards. I don't find that helpful. One thing that you can do is you can have, you can even change the font. If you change the font to a bigger font, it changes the word spacing, and it is less likely that your brain will remember it exactly in the same way. And so it helps you not read what you expected. I was going to ask you to read this. Have you ever seen this? I don't know if you can read it. It's very. Can you read it? What does it say?
I love Paris in the springtime.
I love Paris in the springtime. What does it say?
I love Paris in the spring.
The spring.
Aha.
Wow.
And we've heard that expression, I love Paris in the springtime, but that's what we expect to read. Our brain helps us, but I've actually written the twice. I was trying to do it. It took me 4 times to write it. That's why I was going to hold it up beforehand. So that was supposed to help you see that sometimes your brain is helping you and it knows what you thought, what it expected to read, so it just reads it. But that isn't helpful when you're proofreading. So if you can have someone else help you read it, that helps sometimes. Otherwise, if you can have the time, I think that helps. Sometimes reading aloud helps. And again, sometimes changing the font seems to help. That's a suggestion. So for tomorrow, we have just a few minutes. I want to tell you tomorrow you're going to write What is this thing called family is an essay that you're going to read. And it's about a young man's experience in being part of a family and how he starts to define family. And then you're going to reflect on your own ties about family. What's your own definition of family? So this is something that you do. A definition is an interesting thing. You might do it in a technical paper. You might define your terms because your audience wouldn't understand them necessarily. But also when you're describing philosophical ideas, big ideas, and you want the audience to understand your view of what love is, what family is, what freedom means, then these are kind of definition essays. That's kind of what you're going to do today. You're going to explore the definition of family. So you're going to answer these questions perhaps as a starting point. It's 1 to 2 pages. It's due tomorrow. I don't need a cover page. If you want, you can put one in though. Are there questions?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. That's very funny. Very definitive. You're like, no, we just want to go. Okay. Thank you so much.
Ms. Boswell?
Yes.
So we could just use those questions and kind of.
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Sure. You could talk about it in your own family, or you could use a hypothetical family or a couple of examples, but you're going to be exploring the idea about what ties family together. What does it mean? And explain your points, your view of it.
Okay.
And if you get a chance to see that Alfre Woodard reading on the TED Talks of Ain't I a Woman, let me know. If you find a movie about Sojourner Truth, that would be interesting. I don't know if there are any. It may be your turn to write one.
I think there's a cartoon. Amazon, I think, has a cartoon, but it's not like a film. I think it's more for like kids.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Well, maybe there's time. Maybe there's time. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate your time and your patience and your hard work. And a special thanks to everybody who read Overcoming Many Challenges with Technology, Lighting, Glasses. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I think I'm done. I hear one more person, but I don't see them. Oh, Marie. Marie, is there something I can help you with? Do you have a question? I'm still here. Bye, Marie.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm still here. If you need anything, I'm right here.
I'm hanging up. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.